Right, okay, so Naked Ape, you're going to convince me that what, conservatism is the future?
Yes, that's what that's like a great tagline, but really I just wanted to have a conversation about the differences between liberalism and conservatism. Because I think there's like
Well,
this,
before we go on then, let's define what we mean by liberal and conservative.
sure, I mean, there's this common misnomer that's floating around that liberal and conservative is sort of like this just vacant label, and that even the left and the right don't have any the left wing and the right wing as labels don't really have meanings anymore.
Hmm.
A common conception that I used to hold, I don't hold it anymore, is that a conservative is somebody who's trying to conserve the society. So a liberal is trying to move forward. So a conservative in Russia is somebody who's trying to go back to communism, whereas a liberal in America is trying to go towards communism. And that's just simply not true, by the way,
No.
especially reading more into the conservative right in Russia, specifically Alexander Dugin. There's this very core principle that divides the left and the right. That is, it's sort of like a a motivational theme. Like I would actually talk about it less in terms of truth and more in terms of like a literary theme that one of us believes in and the other one doesn't more. And I personally think that the theme that the right is built on is a fully formed and more self-sustaining theme than the theme that the left is built on.
Right. Okay. Well, let's be specific because
Sure.
neither one of these political positions is a homogeneous monolith. And so saying what we mean is socialism versus liberalism, really, isn't it?
I wouldn't say so. I mean, the thing is that there are some difference between socialism and the liberal position. However, there is a common theme between the medium left and the far left, whereas the medium right and the far right also have a similar theme.
Okay.
Um,
Go. Yeah. Tell me about the common themes between the sort of
yeah,
centre left and far left.
I mean, I think that Alexander Dugin puts it really well in his book, The Fourth Political Theory. He goes into depth about his particular view is that politics is less about, tax policy and how should I say? It's less about like the actual policy and more about perspective. So what the historic individual or historic perspective you have will really guide a lot of your policy decisions. For the left, for liberal ideology, the historical subject is this so-called individual. Personally, I think the belief in the individual it's a little overrated at this point because
God, you German.
it's
Sorry. Go
uh,
on.
well there's this quote, and I really like this. Therefore, they strictly separate a freedom from, which they regard as a moral imperative of social development, from the freedom for the normativization of how, why, and for what purpose this freedom should be used. So, you believe very much in the freedom from all restrictions, which creates this larger ability for this, quote unquote, individual to exist. So the belief in the unfettered freedom of this individual is something that the left believes in, in sort of a more materialist way, whereas the far left believes in the freedom of the individual in just this stronger, more concrete, spiritual way. Like the way I would explain it to you is the writings of Martin Heidegger, right? He
No, no, no.
believes strong, no, not excuse me, not Heidegger, Marcuse.
Right.
Marcuse believes strongly in the belief of what he calls the desublimation of man or the desublimation of self, which is, I mean, I kind of think of it. Not, I might be, like not getting the full picture of this.
Sure.
Marcuse is a heavy read, but essentially, it's like an owner takes takes the ball from the dog and then throws it across the yard, and that's basically what capitalism does. It takes all value from our lives and says, "Oh, hey, you want this value back? Well, now get a fucking job." It's like it's that eventual this desublimation.
Yeah. Okay.
So I mean that what that is it's actually just a stronger argument for the power of the unfettered free will of the individual. So whereas the medium left believes that we should have this unfettered free individualism. The far left believes that all individualism, regardless of things like merit or skill or tact or life decisions, have equal value. And I remember one time speaking to you spoke to the socialist Zezzi.
Zegzizi, is it?
Yeah, the fucking retarded name he has. But
it's a retarded name, but he is a nice kid.
He's a nice kid. He just, needs to get a fucking job. And
he does.
But he was saying, I explained to him that, capitalism works. The amount of people that fail in capitalism is like under a percentage point if once you consider life decisions. He's like, well, why do you have to make good life decisions in order to be successful in capitalism?
What?
Because that's fucking life.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's so utopian, isn't it? But I want to succeed even by making bad decisions.
Yeah, exactly.
How could that happen?
Yeah. And so essentially this is sort of the theme of the left, which is just taken to the extreme in the far left.
Okay, can I just jump in, because I've been studying the far left a lot recently, and I think it's worth making some distinctions. So the far left, it depends which kind of far left we're talking about. That, like, for example, Zegzizi is a Marxist-Leninist. He wants this is someone that Peter Kropotkin would have called a collectivist, who wants their sort of socialist state that would eventually, hopefully, transition into communism, but he wants labor tokens and things like this. The anarcho-communists, the anti-far types, actually do think of themselves as individualists, because they want everyone to, I don't have a better way of putting this, suffer the same fate as they do. It's
a common misnomer to say that. Like, here's something that I've heard. And by the way, any commie who says this is being a disingenuous piece of shit.
Let me finish a second, because this is what they think they believe. And I mean, you can read Oscar Wilde's The Soul of Man Under Socialism, and you can get a really good feeling for why they want that to be true, because they argue, well, the factory worker can't self-actualize. And it's like, maybe that's true, or at least it was in the 19th century. I don't know about now. Good luck finding a factory worker these days. But they think of themselves as individualists because they aren't actually advocating for the Soviet Union. But Kropotkin seems to be one of their premier thinkers. And in The Conquest of Bread, he outright says that his revolution is going to fail to the Stalinists. And it's like, then why would I do it? Well, if you know this is going to fail, why would anyone do this? But so all I want to say is there is a distinction between these people, even though it's pointless because one of them's never going to exist.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the thing that the distinguishes is that both of their end motivational goals are similar. So, I mean, the term I like is to sort of understand the pathetic mind game these people are playing with themselves as state socialism, right?
Yeah.
They believe that Russia is a state capitalist. State capitalist,
yeah.
So, whereas, we understand it as just the application of communism, which in fact is the totalitarian socialist state.
Yes.
Their actual communist belief is that this socialist state will wither on the vine and then just, cease becoming, because that's what happens in...
Again, some of them do. A lot of them think that the revolution will have to be done as the anarcho-communists believe, or it'll be drowned in blood and we'll have to begin again, which is what happens.
But the end goal of the left is still, this greater unfettered freedom of the so-called individual.
Yeah, that's true, yeah.
So, whereas the right wing doesn't believe in this at all. In fact, the farther you get right, the farther you realize that the right isn't just, the sort of a conservatard, well, I like what they're saying, but I want to lower my taxes. No, what the right wing believes in is this completely different sort of literary motivation. So whereas the left believes in the unfettered freedom of the individual, the right is sort of motivated by belonging to a larger collective. So, even the far left, they are collectivist in practice, but they're collectivist for the purpose of individualism. It's collectivism through the back door for the purpose of creating a massless individual a massless, classless individual society. There is only one collective, which is we, the individual, right? So that's what the left believes, whereas the right is, this much more collective, individual for the purpose of the collective, essentially. So there's a quote from Alain de Benoist, which I think really sums up really my distaste for the liberal position. First I'll start with this one. This is like sort of the distillation of what I dislike about the liberal position. This is a quote from some guy, Krishnamurti, some fucking spiritual hack. You call yourself an Indian or a Muslim or a Christian or a European or anything else, you are being violent. Do you see why it is violent? Because you are separating yourself from the rest of mankind. When you separate yourself by belief, by nationality, by tradition, it breeds violence. So essentially, the belief that your individualism has any kind of necessary qualities is something that would motivate different behavior in different communities, and then different power structures, which would then conflict. It's not an inaccurate thing to say. However, he's being kind of an autist by saying that this absolutely. However, this quote by Alain de Benoist really sums up the understanding. This comes from the left's belief or lack of belief in a larger value structure. In fact, the left has replaced the belief in value and structure itself with the belief in this unfettered individualism, this unfettered, completely ill-defined, undefinable, and when you do define it, it is collectivist individualism. So defining this individual is, the more you define the individual, the more collective it will become, simply because when you define what an individual is, he becomes part of a group collective.
Right. Okay. So this is kind of antithetical to how I see it. Actually, I've got to say, one of the so I think that both political wings believe that they hold the keys to freedom.
No, I wouldn't say that.
I definitely think they do. Just to be clear, I'm not saying they actually do. This is just what they believe.
So conservatives don't believe that freedom is the ultimate highest value.
Do they not?
There's some freedoms, obviously, that conservatives believe in, but this unfettered, free agent individual is not is not the goal of right-wing society. The right-wing society's goal is to create a good individual. The best.
Really?
Society.
Okay, that's interesting, because that's not the impression I get from watching the right wing. The impression that I get from watching the right wing is that they want, individual freedom, personal freedom, and the difference between, as far as I can tell, the right and the left is that the right is pro-hierarchy because they are pro-individual merit. And so they think that if you work hard, you can achieve, and therefore any hierarchy that you result in is legitimate because you worked for it. The left doesn't believe in individual agency. They only believe in the power of systems, which means if you want to ensure individual liberty for all people, well, obviously losers don't get to the top of a system, and so they need to tear down all of these hierarchies.
Yeah, and the reason why the reason why the left and the right believe these things is because of the sort of narrative perspective difference. Now, the simplest way I think I can explain this to you, because you set up this dichotomy. It's an accurate dichotomy, right? It's sort of separated. I would view it in literary terms as the difference between the Homeric tales and the Abrahamic tales. Now, the Homeric tales is very, it's similar to the left wing, where all you believe in are these sort of systems, right? And what I mean by that is the Homeric tales, there isn't like a motivation for the action necessarily. It's just, Odysseus is the king. He is doing this. This is, what he does. And look at all this mechanical world. It's this literary world where everything is described in complete detail except motivation and intention,
Oh, hang on. I don't think that's true. I mean, like, the very first word in the Iliad is, the very first line is, goddess sing the rage of Achilles. It's all about his motivations. This
I mean, that's not really. That's not.
this
All
this
right.
I don't know if I agree with that conception, man. And the thing is, like, I would have put it the other way around, because it seems to me that the Bible and the Abrahamic traditions are very disempowering. And so this I would have thought would have been very, very much the sort of
Well, it is disempowering in a way, but
yeah.
it's like this. So where I'm getting this is from my readings of Eric Auerbach's Mimesis.
Right, I haven't read him, so I can't comment.
Sure, the two this is it's a large tome on the entirety of Western literature, and it mentions Homer as the beginning of his judgment, right?
Yeah.
So the two passages he talks about is Odysseus grabbing the throat of the maiden who washes his feet, right? And it's like all of that is sort of explicitly driven. Yes, you may say he has this emotion, but the question is, like, why does he have his emotions? What are his motivations? It's just, okay, the emotions come to him as if it is out of this side perspective of the universe that we don't understand, and then it flashes in front of his being, and then it's gone. In the same way that Aristotle.
Can I jump in again? I don't think that's true. Like, he's annoyed that Agamemnon has disrespected him.
No. Well, I mean, what I'm specifically talking about is when the maiden washes his feet, sees his scar, right?
Right.
So that entire thing, as an example, Homer even describes what hand Odysseus uses to grasp. I think he grasps.
Oh, sorry, I was thinking of Achilles, not Odysseus.
So I mean, that's specifically what I'm talking about.
Right.
And now there is motivation in there. However, when you compare it to the Abrahamic tale, right? What actual universe is described in the Abrahamic tale of him sacrificing his son? He wakes up and he goes 3 days towards a mountain. Doesn't say where, doesn't say what direction, doesn't say what city. It's just he travels for time. He's just, and specifically, an angel appears to Abraham, and Abraham says, "I am here, Lord." It doesn't say the angel appeared from the west, from the east, from this direction. There's nothing in the Abrahamic tale except this man, his motivations. By the way, "I am here, Lord," in the original Hebrew isn't even about being in a location. It's actually, "I am ready to do your bidding."
I'm listening to you.
The universe that's described in the Abrahamic tale.
This is the thing. I mean, like, I always found, like, if we're talking about the story of Isaac, I always found that baffling. Like Abraham completely just abrogates his own agency.
Yeah.
God tells him to do something. So his motivation is irrelevant. His motivation is only to do God's will. And as soon as God says, "Actually, I was just kidding, don't actually kill your wife's son," he's like, "Oh, I guess I won't then." And it's like, well, you may as well not exist, Abraham.
And this is the part of the reason, and this motivation, I'll bring it back to the larger discussion. This is sort of the difference between the left and the right. The left-wing has this very materialist, mechanical view of the universe, where it is these larger forces that are in control of us. And if I were to become a larger individual, these forces would have to become smaller. So, that's, the unfettered individual who is more in control has to be in contrasted with the gods in the mechanical universe being less in control. Whereas in the Abrahamic tales, the more powerful you and your nation and your people are depends entirely on one thing: how much in submission to God you are. So that's the difference. The right wing believes in these higher values and principles that you submit yourself to in order to gain value, whereas the left wing believes in a sort of an intrinsic way, not even that value itself is wrong, but that the belief in any objective value is itself immoral, because then you're imposing restrictions on people.
Yeah, you're creating hierarchy as well.
Yeah. So the difference between the right wing and the left wing is actually this core belief. Do you believe there is a right way to live your life, and are you struggling towards that? Are you submitting yourself to the rules, I would say, of the universe itself? Or are you struggling against, that? And here's an interesting thing. The thing that I find interesting is that the left, even the far left wing, doesn't like, your specific middle of the road liberal position.
Yeah, of course.
But right-wing movements like Alexander Dugin, Alasdair, I'll go ahead and give you this quote, Elaine de Benes. So, like the first one, it will begin like this. Man evolved in cooperating groups, united by common cultures and genetic ties, and it is only in such a setting that the individual can feel truly free and truly protected. Then, I'll go ahead and skip a little bit. And this is the last, his sort of, this really sums up the right's view of the left. So the left believes that all values have become strictly personal, right? Since all values have become strictly personal, everything is now equal to everything, e.g., nothing equals nothing. If all values are personal, then there is no authenticity in choosing any specific value. It's all just an arbitrary life choice with no meaning, no purpose, and no spiritual impact on your life.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing about this motivation is true in the right wing, in the Front National and Golden Dawn. Alexander Dugin speaks about this motivation. It's very much reflected in Hegel's writing about authenticity, an interesting fact. It's also reflected in the writings of the far-right Islamist groups in Islam, in the Middle East. As an example, here's a quote from Fardid, who was one of the intellectual thinkers behind the revolution in Iran. Westerners replaced thinking about the cosmos with the idea of a metaphysical God and eventually ended up with a type of individualism which is devoid of all religious and spiritual meaning.
Yes.
I find that fascinating.
I think that's true as well. I mean, I think the right's problem is that honestly, it's almost going back to like Edmund Burke. The desire for hierarchy has it naturally inclines one to want a godlike figure.
Yeah.
If you need a hierarchy to exist within, you have to have the ultimate father figure at the top of it. And this is why I do tell people that I am centre left, because I believe in hierarchy, but I believe in earned hierarchy, and obviously God can't possibly earn his position at the top of the hierarchy. He's God. It's like saying taking a shit is somehow virtuous. God creating a universe is not a virtuous thing to do. It's no effort for him. So he has an unjustified place at the top of his hierarchy. I don't think that's right.
Sure, I mean, but the right wing would just say that, we're obviously using God flippantly, but, from a more metaphysical direct...
Yeah, of course.
The value structure that you live under, and this is my personal place and why I can't really call myself an atheist anymore. I would technically call myself a pantheist, which is that, I believe the universe itself is God. But, for the normies, I'll say I'm a deist because that's that's like me saying that I'm a Episcopalian. No, I'm a vegetarian that eats fish.
Yeah.
So, anyway, you can either rebel against his authority and die, which is what'll fucking happen, or you can submit yourself to it and be strong. So the question is, it doesn't matter,
That is, I love the way you've put that, because that to me is the complete opposite. I would find submission to a hypothetical higher power to be a profound weakness.
Well, it's because you believe in the individual, which doesn't. I mean, this.
No, but I do. That's completely true.
This individual. This individual doesn't exist without the higher structure. So I mean, that's really the core of like the difference is that without your submission to a higher value structure, which ultimately yours is either it's either you believe in an objective higher structure or a personal value structure which is inauthentic and meaningless. Without
okay, let's stop there, because I don't agree that that's meaningless. I think that the meaning comes from whatever meaning the individual who holds it wants to imbue it with. That doesn't make it meaningless. It just means it's not objective. But that's okay, because it's a value system.
But I mean, it's an arbitrary meaninglessness meaning. It's like
I don't agree.
Well, I mean, I'll re-quote that from Elaine de Benes, and this is sort of the right-wing position. Since all values have become strictly personal, everything is now equal to everything, and nothing equals nothing.
I don't agree. That sounds like a postmodernist interpretation. Value is, it's context dependent, obviously, but it's also dependent on the outcome of what you're doing. Like I don't agree that values are all equal, even if they are all subjective.
I mean, how can you say? Well, this is a question then to you.
Sure.
if you believe that values are not equal, at the same time you believe that they are subjective,
They are.
by what right do you have to say that any value is more or less equal than each other, except in this subjective way? You can't make a claim to truth. Like if you believe that values are subjective, you can't make a truth claim that this value is higher or lower. All you can say it's your opinion that it is higher and lower.
Yeah, of course. All I can give is my subjective interpretation. But I mean, like, there are certain things that are just obvious. I mean, if we take the oppression of women in the Middle East, it's my subjective.
Not as obvious as you think, and it really is. And this is sort of
Well, okay. But just as a hypothetical, I mean, like, I can obviously make a subjective value judgment about the treatment of women in the Middle East, and I mean, that's obviously, it's just my judgment, but it might also be shared by the women who are being forced to wear a giant black bin bag in the middle of the desert,
And if we were talking about, like the political concerns itself, I mean, I'm actually right with you.
I know.
I don't think that I don't think that we should be putting women in bags because of Islam. I think we should be doing it because women are fucking terrible. That's what I think. But the truth is that we're not talking about, the sort of, a political concept. We're talking about the underlying motivations.
I know, but I mean, I was just using that as an example,
yeah, and it's a good example, but like to continue on with that example, right?
Okay, Han, let me before we carry on, because the thing is, right, what this seems to me is an appeal to a hypothetical better system or value system that really doesn't exist.
I don't know if it does. Okay, so at this point, I think what's happened, and it's sort of like the understanding of history, right? We used to have this is a common notion, right? We used to have a belief in an absolute value structure. It was very religious. It was usually tied with Judeo-Christianity, right? Now, after modernism, what really happened, and I think Alexander Dugin puts it really well. Let me see if I can find the passage. He specifically talks about the changing of the epistemology of knowledge that came about with the Renaissance and earlier, whereas knowledge became something that is purely material, purely there it is.
I tell you, I wish you'd asked me you'd sent me some notes before this, because there's a bunch of stuff in the ominous parallels about this that's actually it's really relevant. And sorry,
ominous. What do you mean?
The ominous parallels. It's Leonard Peikoff, an objectivist. He's talking about the same things, and he basically says exactly the same thing. And I would have prepared some quotes from that had I known. But yeah. Sorry, you carry on. Sorry.
I mean, to be honest, this is just stuff that I don't like have these like prepared. I've just been reading, and I know this offhand. I have the books in front of me right now.
Yeah.
Like the definition of truth and knowledge that they used. I mean, okay, here's another quote for you, and this basically represents, it's a reductio ad absurdum, but it's an accurate extension of this sort of material belief, right? So this is a quote from Fazier's The Last Superstition, and it is quoting a passage from The New Yorker. Pat burst in the door, having come straight from a frustrating faculty meeting. She said, "Paul, don't speak to me. My serotonin levels have hit bottom. My blood vessels are full of adrenaline. And even if it weren't for my indigenous opiates, I'd have driven the car into a tree on my way home. My dopamine levels need lifting. Pour me a Chardonnay and I'll be down in a minute." Now, she could have just said, "Paul just got done from a meeting. I'm frustrated. Give me a Chardonnay and I'll speak to you later." But the thing is that this is a belief in a type of knowledge where the only things that exist are the material existence.
Yes.
So you can't make judgments of kind. There are kinds of things that make you happy. There are kinds of things that make you sad. There are kinds of things that make your nation strong. Muslim immigration makes your nation weaker. Having a diverse society breaks down the ability of your society to make cohesive choices. Transgenderism is highly correlated with both psychological illness and suicide. The homosexual lifestyle is preeminently a causal factor in the high epidemic of AIDS in that community. These are all single judgments of kind that you can make when you understand that, that causality beyond just the material present is a thing.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what happened, is that the view of the perspective of the entire universe. What can man know? Well, we can only know what is material. We can only know what is empirical. We can only know this. Well, this is all you know. Dopamine, serotonin, adrenaline. There's no happiness. There's no sadness. There's no spiritual meaning. There's no beyond meaning. And that's really, it's not your position, Sargon, but it's...
It kind of is, actually. I don't believe in spirituality at all.
Well, I mean, okay, then this is an accurate...
but I think when people say spirituality, they conflate a lot of different things. Like, I'm not saying there aren't... I'm not saying that the components don't create more than the sum of their parts, because it's obvious that they do. Like taking serotonin out of a person's brain might not kill them. I don't know. It might kill them, but for the sake of argument, it might not kill them. But you don't have a human being then. Then you have something else, because these components all work together to create something more than what would originally or individually be there. So I'm not saying there isn't. I don't want to use the term spirituality because it sounds religious, but I'm not saying there isn't a certain...
religious. I mean, I have to be honest with you. A portion of this is religious. Even me is not being a theist necessarily.
Yeah.
People like to say, oh, atheism is a lack of belief. That's not true necessarily. I mean, there are different forms of atheism.
Yeah, it's the dictionary definition version of atheism.
Yeah. But, the modern sort of atheist that exists today is inspired by this kind of materialism. So, this kind of leftist materialism is what inspires the different belief in the types of knowledge, which excludes God from the picture. And, I'm not a theist, so I'm not saying that, the theistic supernatural God exists. However, here's an example, right?
Well,
when you say to someone you're happy, what you're saying to them isn't just my dopamine levels are high. What you're saying is you're basically telling them a story about yourself.
Yeah.
These are the kinds of things that happen to me to make me in this state, and this is the kind of thing you can expect from me going towards the future.
Well, just to jump in, because you hit on something that I think is important. When you say I'm happy, that's not just talking about your dopamine levels. I totally agree, because that's entirely deterministic. If we're going to reduce human beings to the components that make them up, and never agree that consciousness is something that is a consequence of these things, but can't necessarily be measured, at least it's beyond our capacity at the moment, then I agree. The left becomes entirely, and this really is the far left. It becomes entirely deterministic. It's completely disempowering. It removes agency. It removes responsibility. Like I'm going to come home and have a wine because my dopamine levels are low, my serotonin is low, whatever, and it's like, okay, but should you be having wine? Is that a wise thing for you to do? It's, it might be like 2:00 on a Tuesday afternoon. No, you shouldn't be drinking wine, and you know it. But it doesn't matter because your dopamine levels are low. This is your mechanism for fixing that. Therefore, it's completely justified. So I agree with you on that, definitely. But I don't like using the term spirituality.
Oh yeah, I mean it's a loaded term.
Yeah.
Mainly because of its misuse by modern Christianity.
Yeah.
But
I think we're on the same page with what we're discussing.
A lot of scholastic people, like Fraser, example, who refer the original church fathers. Mm-hmm. They had a much better metaphysics back then that I would have been much more into than what they have right now.
Yeah, they probably would have chucked you off a roof though, wouldn't they?
Maybe. I've read some stuff about how, I would have to be celibate, but they accepted gays in the monasteries a lot, apparently.
Oh yeah, they were refuges basically.
Yeah, that's the one thing they think. They say that Christianity saved Western civilization. It was really the gays. that'll be what happens. But
there's the heroic narrative for the gays. We saved the West, and then you let the women vote.
You ruined it all. Straight men and your thirst for pussy.
So what are you saying? Straight men are completely cucked by pussy?
They fucking are, man.
It's totally true, yeah.
And I'm honest with you, and I mean this, okay? I'm not gay because I like men. I'm gay because I hate women. I'm seriously about that. I fucking hate the way women behave and how
Oh.
straight let them get away with it. It pisses me off.
Well, no,
It
the thing is, I'm totally with you about not holding women to account for their behaviour. I'm pretty radical in the sort of egalitarian opinions that I have when it comes to that.
Actual egalitarian.
No, I actually am. I can't. No. Oh man, right. I tell you what. Our court
shit.
system is the most fucking patriarchal thing you've ever seen, right? It'll be some old, like, wrinkly-faced judge, and some attractive woman will come in, and then there'll be the guy that she has wronged. Like, I don't know. There was one where this woman stabbed her boyfriend, right, in Cambridge. She's a really pretty young girl. She's doing really well in Cambridge or Oxford, one of the universities, and he lets her off because it might harm her brilliant future. It's like, bitch, are you fucking kidding me? She stabbed the guy, sent her to jail.
I saw a video by what's his name? He has like the Nazi skull. He's Sean and Jen, that guy.
Oh yeah.
Anyway, that cuck. So he had a video response to Roaming Millennial, where Roaming Millennial was like, so black people commit more crime and that's why they're in jail, so it's not race. And he's like, well, you actually have to see, maybe they commit more crime, but if they commit 30% more crime and are 40% more likely to go to jail, then that's still 10% racism. And,
God, what a genius. That's it, Sean. You've got it.
Yeah, you've got it, Sean. We're 10% racist. We're not 100%, but it's just 10%.
It's not binary or anything. It's on a sliding scale, right? Carry on, Sean.
It's like we're 56% white to 10% racist. That's progress. And so the truth is that women are more. If you actually took the same statistical measurements, not including, oftentimes it doesn't include recidivism, and it doesn't include the type of crime, because not all murders in the third degree are committed with the same kind of violence.
Mm-hmm.
So you can also say maybe black people, when they commit murder, aren't just doing it like as a crime of passion.
Mm-hmm.
It may be all premeditated or drug related, etc. But the thing is that women, when you take the same measurement, women are less, men are more oppressed compared to women than blacks are compared to whites. So where's my fucking affirmative action, Sean and Jen? We're 10% racist against whites, but 50% racist against men.
But I love it. I love it. You're absolutely right as well, man. That's great.
Fucking people. They'll do anything to prove that you're not 100% racist, but you're still 5% racist. Fuck off.
Yeah, well, you know what pisses me off is the implicit bias test. It's like, bitch, that's my thoughts you're policing. If I'm implicitly biased, then I'm gonna just enjoy being implicitly biased, and there's nothing you can do about it.
It's not my fault that black people are ugly. What am I supposed to do?
Well, I wasn't thinking that, but but yeah, but that's the thing. It's like, yeah, but there's still bias. It's like, okay. Okay, that should just be the answer. They're like, yeah, but we should measure your thetans or whatever it is that they do in their implicit bias test.
Yeah, you have to be constantly apologizing for being white, because black people are just as implicitly biased as whites, but because you have power.
Yeah.
Your whiteness has power, and that's what give your power to your black, to your wife's son, to your wife's black son.
I absolutely hate the systemic nature of the left, the far left at least. It is the most disempowering thing. I mean, they are literally running around to black people telling them that they can't do anything and that they're being oppressed. I mean, if that's not going to create a self-fulfilling prophecy, I don't know what will. If you, like, literally, and it's not just like individual activists doing this, it's the mainstream media, it's the left-wing politicians, it's all of the power hierarchy that's telling black people they can't get ahead. And it's like, why are you doing this to them? Do you hate them? Do you hate them? Is that why you do it?
And the thing is, and here's like the ultimate thing, getting sort of back on topic.
Yeah.
The reason why I think that the right wing has a better response to that is that all you can ever give is essentially, what is your subjective opinion about these value destructions. And, I'm not going to say, I disagree with some of your positions. Your use of guns, germs, and steel is cringy. That is a lib shit hell book. Fuck that book.
Oh, fuck you.
Fuck you. That book is shit.
Oh, fuck.
I can name you 3 reasons why.
Go on, give me three reasons. Give them.
3 was right. First of all,
Says the man who's literally come out and go, let me tell you about the narrative history of the West using the Odyssey. But Guns, Germs, and Steel's full of shit. Go on.
It's because Guns, Germs, it is. All right. If it is so that geography has such an important thing, it's all about geography, nothing to do with, our belief in meritocracy,
Not
capitalism,
true.
other institutions. If that is a big portion of it, as he suggests in Guns, Germs, and Steel,
It does.
the United States has more miles of navigable river than the rest of the world combined.
Mm-hmm.
Also has more deep water ocean ports on the eastern seaboard than the rest of the Western Hemisphere combined. And yet, the first time we experienced international trading in the United States was when Columbus set foot in the fucking Caribbean. You know why? Because they didn't have banking nations or trade back then, really. They didn't have
They had banking nations and trade back then, but
they didn't have it like in the same way.
Honestly, I don't think it was all that different. It was just the technology level wasn't as developed, but they still had the concepts. But hang on, no, saying the US is remarkably geographically blessed, which it is, and then I mean that's probably the reason that the US came out of World War II so well.
Oh yeah, I mean. Well, it's because, the war happened over there.
Yeah, but that's the point. I mean, I can't remember who said it. It had the fortune of having oceans on either side and two weak nations to the north and south, and it does.
Yeah, and that's true. I mean, however, you can't take geography out of the picture. But the thing is, like what really blows out of the water is why is it that Europe experienced the great rise that it did, and China or India didn't during the Renaissance. And the reason is that the Renaissance and all of these the technological, like as an example, China had invented gunpowder, the compass, paper money, the printing press, etc. All of the examples that we always think, oh, Europe had guns and germs and steel. China had those in fucking spades.
Yeah.
You know why China didn't have colonies in the New World?
I do.
Because they were too busy fighting each other and too busy focusing on their own interior plane.
Hang on. Okay, that's not true. That's not necessarily true, right? That's actually the opposite way around, I think. So the Chinese, I can't remember the name of the emperor because I'm terrible. I'm actually really bad at Chinese history because I can't remember the names. But before Columbus arrived in America, there was a Chinese emperor who had a massive fleet of ships. That had like one of them had the capacity to grow lemons and limes on it and on the ship to prevent scurvy and stuff. But one of the emperors became really insular and basically decommissioned the fleet. So instead of sending them out to explore the world, which they would have otherwise done, the emperor told them not to. This is the problem with China. Like, and for example, like if Columbus, the Portuguese Columbus, had gone to the Spanish Chinese emperor and said, I want to go and explore the New World, or trying to find a passage to India or whatever it was he's doing. And the Spanish king or whatever says no, which is the corollary, the equivalent of the Chinese emperor, then he's got no one else to go to because the power is so entirely centralized there. But instead, he goes to a different king in Europe. There are loads of them around, and they're all competing with each other, and so someone's going to give them money. And the best example of this is actually the fall of Constantinople. The emperor, Constantine, was it the 9th? The last emperor of Constantinople. When I say emperor, I use that term generously. A gunsmith came to him and says, "Look, I can make you the biggest gun in the world that can knock down any wall." And obviously, he's like, "Well, shit, I need to keep this guy around." So he keeps him around on a stipend, but he can't afford to get the gun made. And eventually, the gunsmith's like, "Well, I'm just going to have to go because I want to sell this technology to someone else." And he goes to the Turks, sells it to them, and they take Constantinople. I know, right? That's exactly why Constantinople failed.
By a fucking STEM major.
Yeah.
STEM major.
But
if only they had enough gays.
By a selfish capitalist on the make, that's what it was. But the point is, geography really does matter. It doesn't mean that human agency doesn't exist. It's like you can only act on what's around you, and if what's around you is miles and miles of empty desert, it makes building a civilization really difficult. But
sure, but at the same time, there's sort of a potentiality that that geography gives you.
Yeah.
However, to actually meet that potentiality, you have to have the proper cultural institutions.
Agreed.
There are a number of different areas in the world that had the same potentiality.
Agreed.
There's no reason why the Indians couldn't have, like as an example, germs. the reason why germs didn't affect Europe, like let's say as an example, if Columbus visited the New World and he met the Indian version of space AIDS, right? Everybody on Columbus's ships would be dead by the time they got back to Europe. So I mean, it wouldn't matter because the germs wouldn't affect Europe in the same way as they affected America, because it was Europe going to America and not America going to Europe.
Sure.
So I mean, like the idea that germs had that big of an influence, sure, they did have an influence. However, all of the conquests were made before the first smallpox epidemic had met.
I would have to check that. I'm not sure that's correct.
I'm sure about that. I looked it up.
Yeah.
I looked it up.
Right.
First smallpox was in like okay, the number's going to be fuzzy, but I believe it was let me see, like 1604, 1618, right. Which is at least a decade or so, I believe, after the arrival of the conquistadors. So that's what I'm saying. Guns, the Chinese had them first. Germs, not that big of a deal. Steel, everywhere has access to steel, and it's just a bullshit book.
Okay, no, it's not, right. Let me explain why it's not. So, the guns aspect.
Have this conversation over.
Sorry.
Is this really what you want this conversation to be?
Yeah, now that you've brought it up, we're damn right we're having now, right? To say that the germs were not really a big deal, I think is completely wrong. I mean, the germs caused what effectively like a Holocaust in the New World, and it was because of animal husbandry in the Old World.
Remember the 6 billion Indians, Goy?
Literally, yes.
I know it was a big devastation, but I mean,
it was like the apocalypse.
We'd already conquered all of them at that time.
No, I don't think you had. Not in the 1600s. I mean, hell, America didn't even reach the other side of the continent until like the 19th century, didn't it?
I mean, sure, but yeah, but, okay. But yeah, all of the major civilizations, we're talking about the Mayans, Aztecs, not the Mayans, they were dead. The Aztecs and the Incas were had already been conquered by then.
Yeah, sure,
so
but then
the major civilizations, and I mean, the honest truth is that
I think you're really downplaying the effect of the germs. And then when it comes to steel, not everywhere had steel. You know, steel was actually a highly prized thing. I mean, it was the top level technology at the time.
I mean, it was the top level, but I mean, everywhere. I mean, they for fuck's sake, man.
It's the competitive nature of European states, right?
The Arab slave trade took 50 million black people from the heart of Central Africa.
Yeah.
And you're telling me that that the blacks couldn't have bought a couple steel swords in that time? I mean, there was international trade at all points, and the potentiality for international trade.
Hang on. Right, look. When you say the blacks, it was the blacks who were selling the slaves.
Yeah, to Arabs.
Yeah, exactly. It wasn't like there's no unified black identity in Africa, and there never has been. And why would there be? You know, as far as they're concerned, they're a different tribe. We're going to capture you, sell you to the Arabs, the British, the Portuguese, whoever. They don't give a fuck, right? And when the British ended slavery, like the kingdoms on East Africa, like Benin and places like that, they begged the British not to do it. They begged them not to end slavery.
How dare the British force those poor black people to stop enslaving
We
each
did.
other?
They literally. This is a quote, right? They said, "Look, the slave trade is the glory of our people." It was just like, oh shit.
I'm being slightly glib because the narrative is, what is it? Roots. Them white people came here, stole us from Africa.
Yeah, that's bollocks. It's bollocks.
Entire civilization was built around selling yourselves.
Yeah,
okay.
Well, no, you say yourselves, but it wasn't themselves. It was other people.
Oh, right. I'm sorry.
It's like a black person saying, well, your entire civilization was about killing yourselves. It's like, what? When you mean when French people killed English? That's not what they consider themselves.
You know what I mean?
I know, but it's important to remember this because the thing is like. The competitive nature of Europe, the fact that it was balkanized into a bunch of small states because of its geography is important, which is what's different to China. China is easy to... There's no natural frontier, or at least there are fewer natural frontiers, and it's easy to create a vast land empire in China than it is in Europe.
Okay, well, why is it easier to create a vast land China in China than it is Europe? Europe is
lack of natural frontiers.
Europe is just as geographically separated from the rest of Asia as China is by the Himalayas.
Yeah, but
You know, you have
but once you get past the Himalayas, you're not looking at major geographic boundaries. Whereas in Europe, you've got the Pyrenees, you've got the Alps, you've got the natural shape and the increased amount of coastline that apparently helps.
increased amount of coastline.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
It's like Sean and Jen's measuring the percentage of racism in our.
No. Listen. I'm not Sean and Jen. I'm not talking shit, right? The increased. No, listen. The increased.
Shit. It's Jared Diamond that's talking shit.
No, he's not. That's the thing, right? It's and Thomas Sowell talks about this in Wealth, Poverty, and Politics as well, right? He goes through exactly the same things, and he even goes into the detail and depth of the rivers in Africa, and demonstrates that, like, Europe and America, Europe particularly though, had a huge number of rivers, and most of them navigable. So it's much easier to send cargo. Most of Africa's rivers are not that navigable. Most of them are like shallow or rough or whatever. You know, they're difficult to navigate. Europe had distinct geographical advantages, and having a lot of coastline is important because trading via the sea is way more efficient than trading over land.
Sure, but I mean the thing is that Europe was mostly trading over land.
No, it wasn't. It's always been trade. This is why the Mediterranean was such a huge hub of development such a long time ago.
Well,
you know,
it's like what I mean is like intercontinentally when we're talking about trading from China to Europe. So I mean, like when it comes to Chinese trade, I mean they had the same fucking thing. Like this argument works well about why why didn't the Aborigines have an empire? Other than the fact that they have an average IQ of like 60. Why didn't have they have an empire? They don't have, it's all fucking desert. Okay, fine. But at the same time, here's an example. I've heard this before, and the Jared Diamond argument is, well, they don't have the right kind of food. Are you fucking kidding me?
Oh, yeah, no, those things are bollocks.
The Polynesians, they took boats, right?
Yeah.
Across the entire fucking the entire Pacific Ocean, colonized Hawaii, and brought food with them to plant. And they had a very hierarchical kingdom there before we, took it over and turned it into the best tourist place known to fucking man.
Yeah.
And it's like you're telling me the Aborigines couldn't have taken like some food with them on their way? I mean, for fuck's sake, that's just bullshit.
There are loads of factors. Population density is one of them. Population density matters.
Yeah, but I mean, if you want to talk about population density, you talk about Tenochtitlan. I'm fucked up that.
Yeah, I know what you mean when you're saying it though.
I don't speak Spanish, but anyway,
it's not Spanish.
You know what I fucking mean. Sorry,
I do. Carry on.
Then it was one of the densest cities not just in the New World, but in the entire. I believe it was the denser than all of the European capitals at the time.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
And it was taken over.
Yeah.
So I mean, you want to talk population density? Okay. You fuck off with that. When you talk about domesticated animals...
Listen. You're simplifying these things too much, right? I don't mean population density of one city. I mean population density of a continent. And connectivity as well. For like... And you've got the various other sort of factors. Like, the North America was hardly populated. It was a lot like Africa, and which is why you saw a relatively similar level of technological development. In Mexico and South America, it was improving rapidly. I mean, they had even discovered bronze, which, okay, it sounds, that's not a big deal, but it is a big deal. And these people had less time to develop than people in the old world. I mean, they got there the last into the New World. If you'd left them, they would have developed, all the things that, ancient Europe and the Middle East had developed. Honestly, it's just geographical fortuitousness that had really. Okay, that's too disempowering. I don't want to say it like that, but it's like you've got to be dealt a good hand of cards to be able to play a card game and win. There are some hands you just can't win on. Okay,
fine. There's some geographic areas where you can't make a good civilization.
Australia is the prime example of that.
Yeah, sure. You couldn't make a great civilization out of Australia.
No.
However, if you actually look at the differences, I mean, even between like the poor hands, right? Like the Polynesians, the Australians, and like the Africans, right? The Polynesians did a really fucking good job with the hand they were dealt with.
Yeah.
Whereas the Aborigines were just, like I've read about the government they had before colonization.
They had a government?
Apparently, it was based on dreams.
Oh yeah, like the Dream Time. Yeah.
Yeah, and that was their fucking government. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, that's why you have no civilization, all right? That and an IQ of like 60.
Yeah,
But
but
I mean,
okay, hang on. Like the IQ thing. What do you think the IQ of a German living 2,000 years ago was?
um, probably higher than 60.
Bollocks. Fucking
Uh,
bollocks.
of
Every writer who encountered Germans in the Greek and Roman era called them fucking idiots.
course they did.
They were absolute morons compared
I
to
mean,
literally
the
everyone.
Chinese called us barbarians right until we fed them opium and turned them communists.
Yeah, but barbarian doesn't mean idiot. That means outsider. But like the Northern Europeans.
I don't know. The Chinese said that was some pretty.
Yeah, okay. They may well have had some pejorative intent there as well. But the Romans, the Greeks, they knew that the people from the north were just stupid because the people from the north had no education. They didn't have writing in some places, and they were considered really primitive because they were. Things change over time based on various things that happen around you because of your geographic location. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that the people don't matter. They do matter, but all of these things matter. That's what I'm saying.
Right, sure. All of these things matter. My problem with Guns, Germs, and Steel is that it does explain effectively why, like as an example, you have civilization in Europe and not in Australia.
Yeah.
It doesn't really effectively explain why Europe rose while like as an example, the Ottoman Empire is an amazing example of it was the strongest and one of the long-lasting colonial empires with a very large kilometers for
it was
square
huge.
kilometers holding. And it fell not because of its geographic location, but because of the cultural and economic components, and because of the foundations of within, right?
Sure.
You know what I'm saying?
Well, yeah. Okay. Let me just be clear there,
My
because
point with the Guns, Germs, and Steel is that it relies too much on the Guns, Germs, and Steel and doesn't really understand the cultural and ideological dynamism of Europe that made Europe great.
I agree that it doesn't take those things into account. I think that it would be benefited by a sequel or something like that would go into the details of that.
Guns, Germs, and Steel 2.
Yeah, no, the philosophizing. I don't know, but you know what I mean. Like an expansion on that, because you are right. I mean, it's not that people. I mean, people still had to have the will to do these things. Even you could be in effectively the geographic Garden of Eden for the nation state to create the most perfect nation state. And if the people there don't have the will to do anything or the philosophical tools with which to accomplish any of this, then sure, they're not going to do anything. You know?
There's a good book that I read about this called Carnage and Culture, which speaks just mostly about the military history of the West. But I mean, it starts from Xenophanes and it ends with the Tet Offensive, and it really explains in detail why is it, strictly from a military expensive. Why are all those evil whites taking over our land? Well, it's because their military is more efficient because of the cultural components that go into building a military.
Oh, yeah.
As an example, one of the reasons why Arab armies suck is because armies have no understanding of meritocracy.
Yes,
right?
Yeah, and no one takes responsibility. It's always handed off. I read there was a thing done by like an American lieutenant in the 90s, and it was literally like, why do Arab armies fail? I think it was called, and he was just saying, look, no one ever takes responsibility. The buck doesn't stop. If a commander makes a decision and a bunch of people get killed, then he blames his subordinate, and the subordinate's like, well, I'm not holding this hot potato, and he blames whoever, and so no one's ever held accountable. So no one ever gains any glory.
So I mean that's the thing. That's there's nothing really geographic about the reason about the Middle East not being in power and the Europe being in power at this point. There have been great civilizations in the the Middle East in the past, and there could be in the future. The reason why at this point, from the Ottoman Empire to now, is because there was a degradation of. I think it's sort of a degradation. I wouldn't necessarily say spiritually, but civically. There was a civic degradation within that area, and at this point, they don't have the same civic responsibility or a notion of themselves as a nation or a state and a people, which, by the way, is one of the motivations behind the Iranian Revolution that I was talking about before. I think I gave you that quote that interestingly enough, if you read like the writings of ISIS, etc.,
Yeah.
one of the things they focus on is the degradation that they feel about having a lack of empire and a lack of historic destiny.
Oh yeah.
And that's why I think the conservatives are going to win over the moderate left. And here's why.
Well, hang on. Before we move on, I just want to clarify with Guns, Germs, and Steel. It never makes any claim as to why civilizations sustain themselves or die out, because that is, as you say, cultural internal problems. Political problems that are mishandled by whoever's operating the civilization. I totally agree. It doesn't address that at all, and it doesn't claim to. But sorry, yeah, carry on with what you're saying.
Some geographic benefits to living in Europe, but the thing is that like even the military conquests we had over like the Aztecs are due to our great military advantage.
Yeah, of
right?
course.
Military and cultural advantages. So there are even when you talk, even taking into consideration the geographic benefits, there is something unique about the cultural dynamism of the West that gave us an advantage over the rest of the world.
Absolutely, and that was it. Like Europe was an absolute crucible for combat and for militarism. It was like having all of these small but well-populated states sitting next to each other for 2,000 years. Yeah, that's or 1,500 years after the fall of the Roman Empire.
The other thing is that like the kind of war that we held. This was described in Carnage and Culture, like where in other societies there would be some emphasis placed on like honor and nobility, etc. Like the nobles would all have. I think there was some law in China or somewhere else, maybe Japan or something, where I don't recall this. This is from memory. My memory is shoddy.
That's right.
But basically, there was some advance. I think it was like a crossbow or something of that nature that was made illegal because that would give the peasants too much power.
Oh, that happened in Europe too. You weren't allowed to use the crossbow against Christians, apparently, according to the church.
Oh, well, they did that all the fucking time.
Yeah, I know. That's because people are full of shit and don't give a fuck. But the Catholic Church outlawed the use of the crossbow on other Christians, and it's like, okay, you can say that. It's
what are you gonna do? Excommunicate?
Yeah, whatever works is what's going to be used. So just get used to it. Is basically you're absolutely right. Like the history of Europe did definitely craft European cultures. And it did make. The only reason, in my opinion, that Europeans actually did as well as they did is organization. Having guns, germs, and steel. These are all lovely natural advantages that meant that, like, these countries could run colonial empires on a budget effectively.
Shit! Sargon.
Yes.
I haven't had headphones in this entire fucking time.
So.
Can you check the audio to see if it's gonna? Are you live right now?
I'm not live, but I'm recording it.
Oh, fuck. You should check this audio because it might be fucked up because I haven't had headphones on.
No, it'd be fine.
You sure? Because my mic reverberates.
No, if I hear it fine, then it will record fine. That's...
Really?
Yeah,
you
yeah.
Sure?
I'm certain. I'm certain. And if I'm wrong, then fuck. This has been a really fun discussion.
Alright, anyway, so you gives a fuck.
Yeah.
Put it up anyway. I'll get some subs out of it, you dirty goy. Anyway,
but yeah, but seriously, like I don't want to dismiss the role in which the culture plays, but culture really is shaped by geography, I think, as well. Like it absolutely is, right? Culture.
The potentiality for behavior is ultimately shaped by geography, right? Like if you don't have any farmland, you can't be a farmer.
Yes, and
however, culture itself is something that I think is organically created. I think but
it's not free from outside influence, and it's influenced by what's around you, by the events that happen to a people, shape their culture.
I think, and this is actually a conversation that I have with white nationalists as well, because it answers a lot of their qualms with their beliefs. Okay,
yeah.
So civilization itself adds an extra layer of selective action upon a people.
Of course,
and this is one of the things, this is one of the difficulties that I have, the criticism I have of the alt-right. Is that they believe that a quote-unquote white nationalist state will be the savior of them, but they're unable to really explain, what is a white nationalist state other than just a state with a whole bunch of white people. Does it have any moral obligations? Does it have any sort of responsibilities? Does it have any political inclinations, any narratives? anything other than, the gold sticker that is represented by being white. And this is a very Spenglerian argument, by the way. So this is, arguing from the left. It's arguing from against the alt-right from a alt-right position. What you need to have is a core theme or a spiritual motivator that motivates the people into action and behavior. And that is how you create a civilization. They have, and that motivation, by the way, it adds an additional layer of selective, I don't know, of trait selection onto your geography. So you have initial geography, which does have its own trait selection. I mean both. I mean that in an evolutionary sense, and in a more like meeker like cultural sense.
Almost like a romantic sense. Yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah. And then you have the civilization, which acts as an extra level of selection. Like, as an example, there have been many articles coming out about the degradation of the genetics of Muslims because of all the cousin fucking they've been doing.
Yeah.
Seriously, it's a lot of consanguineous marriages, and they are fucking up their kids, man, for generations. So I honestly, at this point, they might not be able to come back. It's pretty fucking bad, but like that's an example of civilization itself has a selective pressure on the future of a nation, and that's why I believe the conservative vision of the future is the correct one. The reason why is twofold. The first real reason is I don't think that your position can really have that deep, meaningful impact on people because it's inauthentic.
Don't tell me that my personal beliefs and experiences are inauthentic, you fuck.
This is why. You may believe them arbitrarily, but you do not...
I arbitrarily believe my own beliefs now. Oh, fuck you!
Okay. All right. When it comes to moral beliefs, Sargon, if your moral and values-based beliefs are subjective, it is an inauthentic belief.
No, I don't agree that the only authentic beliefs are objective ones that are derived from God.
Well, I'm not saying derived from God.
You are. If you're saying if you want an objective belief, it has to be derived. A moral value system. It has to be derived from God, doesn't it? I mean, where else could it come from? Where else would it come from?
From the the implicit laws of the universe itself. So
how is that different from saying God?
Well, I mean, I don't think that's different from saying God. But I mean, it depends. You could believe that the universe itself is God. That's kind of my position.
Yeah, but if the universe is set up the way it's set up by God, then say if all of your moral values come from the way the universe is ordered, then they do still come from God.
Okay, so your moral values come from your submission to the higher order given to you by the universe. And at that point, the universe, even if it is, not supernaturally created, even if it was created by the Big Bang or whatever scientific method, whatever a materialist belief you have, which is probably correct. I'm not disputing the Big Bang, by the way.
No.
So if the Big Bang and everything in the modern understanding of science is correct, and you believe that the universe is where you should drive your moral values, then that scientific universe would essentially be the same as a belief in God. It would not be a supernatural theistic God. However, it would basically be your God. And I'm not necessarily saying that's a wrong thing. That is actually specifically my position.
Yeah, no, it's very interesting, actually, that you say this like this, because I've been thinking about this a lot. And I'm trying to like hammer out a kind of thesis on this, I guess, on the moral sovereign, because this is something that the SJWs play on a lot. They make themselves the moral sovereigns of the people, and it's horrendous. I hate it. I absolutely hate it. They have no moral claim to your actions based on some perceived oppressed group. They just don't.
Right.
But in the right-wing religious view, the moral sovereign is God, obviously. But totally unaccountable for anything. So...
Yeah, well, I mean, see, that's the okay. So when you look at Oxham's view, and this is one of the things that I've been reading into a lot. Oxham, Oxham's razor, it's used and abused by atheists who have never actually read Oxham. Oxham was I believe it's called a nominalist, which means he did not believe causality exists.
Right.
So the notion we have A turns to B turns to C.
Mm-hmm.
His Oxham's razor was basically used to say, you can't say that anything causes anything. All you know is that God exists. oh, by the way, God could order you to hate him, and that would be good for you to do, and you must simply believe in this completely atomized individual who is in relationship, who is known only by relationship to this absolute God. That's the only thing that you can know. And it's basically, Descartes' demon, right? And God is the demon.
Yeah.
Essentially. So the thing is that that's not the God that had always existed. If you read I believe it was Five Proofs of God by what's his name? Okay, so there's Aristotle who had attempted to prove God. There was one argument from him.
Thomas Aquinas.
Yes. Fuck.
I just Googled it. Don't worry, it wasn't mine.
So if you read stuff like that, it's a metaphysical argument for the existence of God. It's not God exists because the Bible told me so. When you have faith, it's a definition. This is what God is. This is how you would know his actions. This is the metaphysics of his existence in relationship to the universe. So essentially, the original belief is the universe is a creation of God, and you can know God by knowing the universe. And then it was changed to the sort of belief that God is outside of the universe as a supernatural being acting against the rules of the universe in a Deus Ex Machina way. And that's not the way that it had always been. So I want to stress that, like, it's not always been like that. But it's just because what I think happened is our definition of truth divorced our belief in God from science, and I don't think that's necessarily a good thing.
I think if you're a deist, then it doesn't have to be at all. Like as you're describing your position, I don't think that's necessary to divorce science and God.
It's not necessary.
But,
and technically, I would say I'm a pantheist, but like I said, for normies, I'm.
Yeah, we'll just use that for now because it's easier. But the thing with that is you can never ever claim to have any received wisdom from God. You're never going to have any prescriptions. So
sure, I mean, I wouldn't say that necessarily. So you would never have any received wisdom from God directly. Yes, however, a deist or somebody who believes as I do, and you don't necessarily need to use the term God. That's why I'm trying to stress this. Yes, people who believe in God do believe this. However, it does not necessarily need to be God. But it is the order of the universe itself has an implicit design, not by, and I'm not saying by a creator, right? I'm saying that it has a design, maybe it's random design, right? But its implicit design has chosen certain kinds of things as powerful, as good. And the sort of faith-based thing is then, well, everything that is powerful is ultimately good, and essentially good people are, if you are good, you become powerful. And I think that actually bears out in large part. You know, there are some people who can become evil, he can become powerful through evil.
Yeah.
But, when they do, they're weakening the rest of society to their benefit, and, their total evil, the total benefit to their children, etc., and to humanity is lowered. So eventually it'll all come tumbling down if evil is allowed to thrive in a society.
Okay, so that's interesting because that seems to be a different way of approaching what I also agree on. I'm very Aristotelian in that I think that the actions you take define what you are, and
Sure.
that, well, you say sure, but I mean a lot of people don't believe that. They believe the complete opposite. They believe that they define themselves as a thing, and then the actions they take are irrelevant. Because
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah. It's just for anyone listening who didn't. I was just clearing that. And so I'm very much like a sort of method of action guy, and I agree with you that, like, someone like Attila the Hun or something like that can end up accruing a huge amount of power to themselves, but be an overall negative, a net negative, just because of the things they're actually doing. Whereas if you look at something like the British Empire, it ends up being an overall positive because of the actions they're taking, even if they do bad things in the process. Like, the sort of inclusive you've read Why Nations Fail, right?
I have not read that one.
Oh,
I need to read Thomas
Sowell. Thomas Sowell and Why Nations Fail. It's not Sowell. It's I can't remember the author. I can't remember the author off the top of my head, but it's really good because he basically he differentiates between extractive and inclusive economies. The extractive ones are like the Spanish and Portuguese, where they just went to the New World and just sunk took all the gold. They just took everything. Yeah. Whereas the British and the French had inclusive economies, which meant that they would they sent colonists out. The colonists had land. They built the land, and because they were individualistic and they were self-empowered, they benefited from their own actions, and therefore they were encouraged and incentivized to actually create something rather than oppress people. And this is why the English-speaking nations are great and the Spanish-speaking nations suck. And so this, like...
Well, also they speak Spanish and nobody can fucking understand each other.
Yeah, fuck me. No. but that's like...
No, and that's a really good point. Yeah. And that's sort of like... that's why the right wing differs from the left wing. Because the right wing has this the belief, like, that, the order of the universe itself is something that you should submit yourself to in the creation of your own value structures, right? So it's like, if it is true, as you have expressed in this conversation, that all values are perspective-driven, then yes, everything is arbitrary, and you may simply choose any value distinction that you want. But at that point, what you're essentially arguing, if you ever argue values, you're essentially a sophist.
Well, hang on. I don't agree that means that things are arbitrary, because arbitrary means without reason. There are lots of reasons, like that we hold certain values that we do, even if they're
always subjective reasons, and none of them would be truth-based.
No, that's not necessarily true. It's just a subjective value judgment.
Okay, wait. And can you name? I'm really confused about this. Sorry.
Okay, go on.
What is a subjective value that you have that you think would be,
universal?
Yes, universally true.
Okay, yeah.
Subjective.
People need to take care of their children. That's a subjective value. That's obviously, but it's okay, not entirely universal. You get progressives who think that abortion's a moral good, but it's hard to talking in general terms.
You have to say that life that life deserves to exist. Like, what if life is such, like human life itself, right, is so terrible? Our brains are basically designed to feel pain in order to make us behave, and because of the state of the universe and all the racism and whatever subjective measurement you want to take. Because of all the negative things, life itself does not deserve to exist. Therefore, it would be better for my children to have never been born.
Oh, there are definitely people who think that, yeah.
Yeah, and by the way, this is a motif that's taken from several different places. One of them is Mephistopheles and Faust. Yeah. There's also a great, a really great. It's about King Midas, this parable of King Midas, which is related in Nietzsche's Good versus Evil. So what I'm saying to you is, even that, Sargon, has subjective bias implicit into it.
Yes.
It's not a universal thing that can be said as see. Okay.
No. Okay. Hang on. Let me finish what I was saying, because I'm not saying it's subjective, and when I say universal, okay, yeah, there are people who do think in silly ways, but even then, I don't know if they genuinely believe that. I wonder how much of that is they kind of have rationalized themselves into a position where they're forced to tell themselves that. Because ultimately, if they were faced with a child and told, right, okay, it's better for humanity or just the world, the universe, whatever it is they hold dear, to kill this child, they're not going to do it.
Some people have, but the essential thing, they're all also antinatalists. Schopenhauer was a famous antinatalist who believed that you should have children. So it is a legitimate position that does exist, and you also have to. There's a lot of the mass shooters, etc. By what? But
then are they putting forward a normative system of values, or are they nuts?
Well, some of them, if you read the writings of the Columbine shooters, this is the kind of shit that they were talking about, right? Life doesn't deserve to exist. Yeah. I don't deserve to exist. I'm going to kill these people to prove them that that they should be dead. That kind of shit, right? So essentially, you can't make a claim to truth that their argument is wrong on the basis of truth.
No, I can't. No.
And that's why your position is inauthentic.
Well, I don't agree that I guess the definition of authentic
by inauthentic is I'm using it in a Hegelian way, right?
Right, okay.
Not Hegelian, excuse me. I'm using it, for fuck's sake, did I really forget his name?
It doesn't matter whose name it is, just define how you mean it.
Okay, so let me see if I can pull this up from the Fourth Political Theory, because he had a really good way of using it. Heidegger's understanding of I can't pronounce it. Dyson.
Right.
Fuck. And I need to read more on Heidegger anyway.
Yeah, me too.
But essentially, if you are going to behave in some way, and this is going to be butchering it, by the way, but just to try and express talk, right? If you're going to believe something and behave in something, you should believe it not just as a subjective, arbitrary thing that you believe, or excuse, as a subjective thing that you have chosen. You should believe it because it is true, because it is something that is inherent to your being. And if you don't believe that something is true, like I believe it because it's subjective, then you can't believe that it is actually inherent to your being. It's something that you are adding on to your being.
Yeah, but I mean, can value judgments ever really have a truth content to them?
I think so. And this is
really?
why.
How? Oh, yeah, sorry, go on.
So if your value judgments are perspective-based, no. Then it is subjective.
Yeah.
Then it is inherently arbitrary. And then, like I said, the best...
Just because it's subjective doesn't make it arbitrary. Just
okay.
I'm being autistic about that. Sorry.
Can't necessarily be arbitrary. However, even if you were making these value-based judgments based on some sort of higher abstract value judgment, right?
Yeah.
So let's say I believe in freedom, and that's why we should let you do abortions, right? Your belief in freedom itself is still arbitrary. There's still even the higher abstractions of values that you believe, that you choose to believe in order to have your subjective value structure on, are ultimately based purely on your perspective.
Yeah, I don't want to use the term arbitrary there. I think you saying subjective is fine. And I would agree completely. It is. But saying arbitrary, it seems like a convenient way of dismissing something for not being objective. And some things just aren't objective.
I'm not trying to dismiss it entirely. I mean, there is some value to them. But I'm trying to draw a distinction between I'm trying to draw a distinction between truth claims and claims of perspective.
Yes. Okay.
So
I can.
Make, your value, and when I'm saying arbitrary is, in my opinion, in my definition of arbitrary, if you make a claim that is based on perspective,
right,
that is not based on a claim of truth, then your perspective is inherently biased, and you cannot be said to be making a true claim unless it is based on some absolute objective universal basis, axiomatic truth or something of that nature. So
right, okay,
if
hang on, because
it by definition cannot be axiomatic or I use that word wrong all the time, so I don't want to be careful to stay away from that.
Well, it kind of means self-evident, but
right.
Okay, so just because something's biased doesn't mean it's necessarily untrue. I think the problem with bias, the problem with bias is often it takes people to conclusions that aren't true.
Yes, but here's the thing, Sargon. If you and this is ultimately the thing, if your value-based distinctions are perspective-driven, there is no way for you to verify if they are true.
That's true. But
so in that way, your argument against another person's value distinction is
consequentialist. It has to be consequentialist.
I guess it could be consequentialist, but even then, if you were to choose a utilitarian or a consequentialist argument, by what right do you have to say these consequences are bad or these consequences are good?
Well,
again,
it depends what the shared values of the people talking are.
Yeah, but then again, those shared values are... I mean, when I say arbitrary, it's like you could have been born in a different time in a different place, and there would be an entirely different person.
Yes.
And that's what I mean by, arbitrary. There's no like...
No, I totally get you now. I didn't realize until you explained it. But okay, I've got some bad news. There is no objective measurement for human beings like this.
There may be an objective measurement.
I don't think
here's
there
the
is.
objective measurement. It is the measurement that the universe itself applies. This is, your strength.
Yeah, but the universe itself gives us too much freedom to be subjective.
That's a good maybe. However,
I like the effort you've gone to try and prove this, though. This has been great. I've really enjoyed this.
This is something that I'm not like. I've been thinking about this myself.
Yeah.
It's not. I've been planning for years, Sargon.
Well, no. It's great that this is like something that's been occupying your mind, and you've just been reading further and further into it. It's really interesting.
So, it's like this, okay?
Yeah.
there are some behaviors that are definitely wrong, and we can and if you use the universe as your basis, what is the universe choosing as, the wrong answer? Then it is fairly obvious that the universe is choosing some things as the wrong answer. There are some behavioral sets that will kill you.
Well, that's subjective. How do you know it's not good to be killed?
Because, okay, so in a perspective-driven, value-based belief system, you're entirely right. However, if I were to say that it is not me that is deciding what is valuable, it is ultimately the universe itself that is selecting what is valuable, then I look and see, what is the universe selecting? What traits, what behaviors, what kind of activity is the universe selecting? And again, when I could go back to, good behavior gets you power. It's a really great example you had between extracting economies and
inclusive economy.
Inclusive economies. That's a good example where if you have a good value-based system, then not only will there be, more power for you, more wealth, more affluence, more survival, then it will be more power for everybody. And that's essentially the argument that I would have. The fact that exists is contingent and subjective to the universe. So the fact this is like an amazing thing. It could be entirely opposite. You could imagine a universe where that doesn't exist, where it is actually beneficial for you as an evolutionary thing to be a murderer, a rapist, etc. However, it isn't beneficial in the long run because of that order in the universe. And I believe that order that we have in the universe is evidence of objective morality.
Right. I think that's really, really interesting. I don't actually agree that that's objective morality. I think that I
mean, there are some things that are not objectively moral, man. Chocolate and vanilla ice cream, whether or not you like ranch houses. I'm trying to buy a house. But you like ranch-style houses or A-frames or anything like that, that's not a moral question.
No. I know, but I'm talking specifically in terms of moral questions. So,
But in terms of moral questions, you can see it that there are some behaviors that are selected by the universe itself as being empowering behaviors.
Yes.
Whereas there are other behaviors that are selected by the universe. There are certain gradations, obviously. If you fuck a tranny with a condom once and never do it again, that was bad. But,
you've made a few mistakes, haven't you?
A few mistakes in Thailand. But, at the same time as that, it's this sort of behavioral pattern that you have that opens up to these other eventualities that are clearly the universe selecting you as, I would say giving you the Darwin Award, but in an evolutionary sense, it is selecting you in a negative fashion so that you will no longer propagate or exist in the universe. So the qualities that you have won't be passed on.
Yeah.
And I mean both in a spiritual way and in a literal way.
Yeah. I agree that there's a kind of meritorious selection process. When any person is taking any kind of action, how reality responds to that action is, the consequence of what they've just done. So, and usually predictable. So that if, for example, you study hard at school, you keep your head down, you get a good job, you're probably going to end up owning a house in your 20s. You'll probably end up doing very well, or you could be a dropout like me and not own a house.
Yeah. By the way, Sargon. What you're saying right now will get you labeled a fascist.
Yeah, I know. That's what makes me a right-winger now, I guess.
Yeah, it
personal
does.
agency.
You aren't necessarily a right-winger. You're very moderate. You do lean left because you value the power of the individual more, whereas I don't think the individual, I think that what you believe in is, it's not necessarily delusion when you believe it because you have, moderated form of it, but the belief that is common in society is a delusion of the individual. The individual doesn't exist without a collective group, without responsibilities, without, obligations and added on to the individual.
Well, yeah, I don't think that individuals exist in a vacuum. And the thing is, when I say I'm an individualist, like the alt-right really don't understand what individualism is, and it's actually really amusing. Like I had one send me a meme of a bunch of ants eating a spider, and I'm like, oh yeah, because when we were storming the beaches of Normandy, we sent one guy. And the Germans just took him apart, and it was just like, why didn't we send more than one? Oh, we're not collectivists. It's like, no, you idiots. The individualism is a description of the most. It's the important value that the society is pushing forward. In the case of the Germans, it's the collective, the state, or the German people, or whatever, above
they
actual.
have a more nuanced argument. I mean, they make the arguments shittily, but as an example, I mean, some versions of collectivism, particularly when you take into account the, I've actually spoken with you, I believe you had it recorded, the problems that I have with the alt-right. However, collectivism is at some rate, in some level, is a benevolent, beneficial trait to have from an evolutionary perspective.
I don't know. Maybe
it works for
maybe
the Jews, man.
Hey,
works really fucking good for the Jews.
Okay, I don't even know if that's true, because look at the virgin German collectivism and how Nazi Germany did. But look at the British Chad liberalism that spread white people all over the world. If the alt-right want to,
you're using the word collectivist in a really, and this is what I don't like about you. Sorry, God, I'm gonna expose you. Okay,
expose me.
Fucking expose.
Expose.
The way that you use collectivist is really sloppy, right?
Yeah, go on.
So acting, there is a rational self-interest in acting in the best interest of people who think and act like you.
Sure.
The reason is that for certain, if you are a good person, if you're an asshole, maybe you shouldn't, right? But if you're a good person with good intentions and you want a good society, if you act in the rational self-interest of people who act and think like you, then it is likely that you will have the kind of good society that you would want to live in. That is a collectivist notion.
I don't even know if that's correct. Well, I mean, it is, but what I mean is, it's really a reference to the highest value. It's not about your ability to cooperate or anything like that.
Yeah.
For example, I would be very surprised if at some point Britain gets into a war and ends up, I don't know, executing British people for being the wrong kind of British people. Whereas the Germans absolutely did do that.
Yeah,
and that's the difference. Let me finish, because it's the this is the thing. The alt-right and I guess other people are probably failing to understand what I mean, because it's not that you can't act in groups or anything like this. Of course you can. It's just the ethos of the group is to either protect the group or to protect the individuals within the group. That's the difference.
Yeah, but I mean, so the issue that I think comes up, and this is also the reason why I consider myself more right-wing. And by the way, this is sort of tangential to why I believe the conservatives will win. So when it comes down to it, ultimately, you are right that it isn't necessarily just a belief in the collective or just a belief in the individual. It really matters about your higher values. However, I think that the left, and I believe you often do, not necessarily all the time, but I believe that the left often holds the belief of the individual as too high of a value without applying other values to it.
Well, they hate hierarchy. They loathe hierarchy in every way, so they don't really have a choice. But the irony is, as you say, they slip into collectivism without knowing it, without understanding it. They can't help themselves.
And the thing is that what I think is that I believe that one... Let me see give me a second how to put this. So it doesn't necessarily matter if you are individualist or collectivist, essentially. What matters is what kind of individual and what kind of collective are you attempting to make. So that's why I really dislike, the boiling it down to individualist versus collectivist. Because the truth is that what the alt-right is afraid of is the sort of notion that is common among the left, that there is essentially no difference in kind between these different kinds of groups, and you should judge everybody as an individual, even taking in aggregate differences. So, as an example, you know what? I do not want to live in a society or a community with a high population of Muslims in it. I would also very much prefer to. I would also very much prefer to live in a community that has a high population of the kind of people that I am,
Not necessarily white per se. However, the kind of people that I am is going to be white. So it is much more likely that a white neighborhood will have the same values, the same belief in reciprocity, the same meritocratic understanding that I do. There are black people and Hispanics and Muslims.
This is an American thing, isn't it? Because I'm just sat there thinking, Christ, like there are neighborhoods in Britain where they've got a large number of Polish immigrants, and the Poles are causing real problems. And in your dichotomy, in your worldview here, that'd be okay because they're white. And it's like,
well, I mean, it's not that it would be okay because they're white. I mean, it would depend, right? I haven't. Okay, I've met a lot of Africans from Africa, best fucking people I'll ever meet, and I have to say, I think a part of it is because they were from the English-speaking parts,
Probably.
and they were heavily Christianized, and also they could afford the plane ticket over here, so we don't have the problem in Europe of them just walking over, right? So the thing is that it's not necessarily that white is the one selecting factor. However, you can make the value judgment that white nations are, as a basis, more wealthy nations than other nations, and it is probably due in part to the values and beliefs that white people have as a civilizational heritage.
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah, the European sort of the values and heritage. Absolutely.
And I think that protecting that heritage and civilization is important, but the problem I have with the alt-right is they like to use white as I think white is a misnomer.
Yeah.
If they were, European nationalists, right? And the real problem is that, there's this divide of, America is really a mutt country,
Of course.
Like left 56% face. We're only 56% white anymore. So, when we talk about white actually means something in America, but it doesn't necessarily it can mean something in America depending on where you are. It doesn't necessarily mean anything in Europe. So when people say, well, I'm white and I want white nationalism, that can mean something in America. It's just that, there needs to be a better term for it because there's a lot of other portions of white nationalism that aren't better. And this is, from a far right perspective, right? Fascist Italy had no beliefs about race. They were extremely civic in their belief about fascism.
Yeah, but are the Italians even white?
Probably not. But here's a quote from Benito Mussolini. I have this on hand. Race is a feeling, not a reality. 95% at least. Nothing will ever make me believe that biologically pure races can be shown to exist today. Ooh. National pride has no need of the delirium of race.
Ooh, so, I love it. Civic fascism.
Yeah, civic fascism.
Love it.
So, I mean, it's not necessarily that race is, the absolute measurement of it. However, racial identity, the collective notion of racial identity is a part of what makes up a successful nation.
I think just identity itself. It doesn't have to be racial. But
it doesn't have to be, but often is.
Like for example, I'm reading Mein Kampf at the moment, and Hitler keeps going on about the ethnic nationalism within the Austro-Hungarian Empire and how the Germans are the ones getting shafted, but they're getting shafted by the white people. So the white people thing it is an American construct. It's not.
Yeah.
It's like the black people thing. Like we were talking about earlier. Like the blacks are selling each other. It's like but they don't have a unifying identity. They weren't doing it to each other as far as they were concerned any more than the English killing the French was them killing the English.
And the conversation about race that we have is very Eurocentric because, Europe is really the only place where we have this kind of problem of a multicultural society. There are other places, South Africa is an example, and let me see. I think South Africa is the only other example that springs to mind that's a heavily multiracial society anymore. But it's basically just, European societies where there are areas that are heavily multiracial, and then South Africa and the United States. And other places don't have to have this kind of conversation. What does it mean to be white? What does it mean to be black?
Yeah.
Because, if you're in Nigeria, you're not a white Nigerian or a black Nigerian. You're just a Nigerian.
What's it mean to be Chinese? Maybe not Chinese, actually.
Well, Chinese are 80%, 85% Han. And the other ethnicities, most of them colonize, and they don't like the Han anyway. But they are explicitly an ethnic nationalist. nation. So I mean, as far as it goes, it's not necessarily wrong to have a racial component to your identity. The problem I have is that the alt-right's belief of their racial component is ill-defined, and at this point, it's it doesn't really.
Well, it supersedes everything else. That's the problem.
Yeah.
It's the hierarchy that they put it at. They put it at the top.
Yeah, and it's like I can understand why they would, because it's basically just an emotive reaction to the current state of affairs.
Yeah.
So obviously they're going to push this button because this is the big red button.
Yeah.
But I mean, at the same time, the best criticism of the alt-right I've ever seen was from the distributist.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Have you ever talked to him?
Oh, last podcast I did.
I thought you did. Yeah, he's a great guy.
I've talked to him before on my live stream channel as well. But yeah, sorry, go on. What was his criticism?
Yeah. His criticism was specifically the one that I actually picked up his criticism. It's a very Spenglerian argument that the belief in whiteness as a value structure doesn't give the proper motivation, spiritual or civilizational motivation, to create any kind of cohesive community. Yeah. It's a very, I think it's a calcitized, I should use. It's a very sort of old,
calcified,
crumbling, calcified. That is right. A very calcified notion that isn't very dynamic, that doesn't have any real important meaning to your life, except as sort of a denotative.
It's just tribalism.
It's a golden sticker.
Yeah, it's just, exactly. It's like a gold star, isn't it? It's like,
right,
because like, man, the cultural differences between white people in Europe are fucking enormous. Like they are. I mean, like the Brexit negotiations. I'm actually working on a big video at this at the moment. But the Brexit negotiations at the moment are a complete shit show because of the cultural differences between the continent and England. We don't understand each other, and there are a bunch of articles from Continentals going, Brexit is nothing but English exceptionalism. And the thing is, they're right. It absolutely is. It absolutely is.
How dare you believe that Britain should be, the first priority of the British government?
Yeah, exactly. And like, it like they can't understand why we aren't systemic thinkers like they are, and it's like because we just believe different things. Like in the Germans, for example, I did a video on this yesterday just for my alternate channel. 72% of Germans believe that their success in life is due to factors outside of their control. That's enormous. And in Britain and America it's about 38%, something like that. I mean, like it's the opposite worldview to the Anglosphere that the Continentals have, and it's just like, how can we ever really understand each other or have any kind of concord? Because this means if you believe that all of your success in life is because of things outside of your person, then why would you ever... you wouldn't... I mean, that's a disempowering thing to say. Whereas it's the complete opposite of the British. So the Germans want to start and finish everything on paper before they make a single step. Whereas the British will, and quote, muddle through and just carry on and just keep doing with the self-confidence that they'll be able to figure it out as they go. And this is you can see that Theresa May and her team have approached there was this photo that came out where the Barnier and his team, they had stacks of paper on their desk, and then you've got David Davis and the British team. They don't have a single sheet of paper on the table. And it's just like, and everyone's like, oh, look, they're unprepared. And it's like, it's not that they're unprepared. It's just the British tend to approach things differently, and they're a lot more flexible. And this is what we're seeing. It's really amazing. But yeah, all I'm saying to that, the alt-right conception of white people is nonsense. It's an American
and that's the difficulty that they have. But see, the thing that I find, and I think that this is true, is that the position that has been taken up on the left is a position that I don't believe is sustainable. Because, like I said, I was trying to get at this before, the left can't make a truth claim to their own, to their values,
Sure.
It could just, the only claim that the left can really make is a sort of claim of rational self-interest. It's, that sort of, we're on your side. And even when it comes to, like, the moderate left, it isn't saying, it's okay for the gays to be gay because I know it is. It's we're on the side of the gays having marriage because love is love and you should just let them be. It's not, a moral argument. It's a self-interest argument. Let us be self-interested individuals. And the problem is that the belief in that, the endless self-interested individual eventually runs amok on two issues. First thing is what is in my interest, and what it gives. If everything is in my, if it's possible that everything is in my interest, then then you have really no sort of value structure which would guide or judge or give any influence in deciding anything of any influence.
Yeah.
And this isn't just, from an outside source. This is an internal source.
Sure, no,
as well.
I agree that's the internal logic of the far left, at least.
At least the far. I think
Yeah.
it is represented in much of the left as well.
But
the thing is that
hang on. So the thing is that there are sharp ideological differences between the centre left and the far left that make
Sure.
them incompatible, but they have similar interests. And so they don't, like the centre left, I think, are really starting to become aware of this at the moment. But anyway, what the difference, though, is that isn't the rights just hypothetical and probably not true?
maybe.
And so, but before we go on, I'm not saying there isn't value in a lie. I'm not saying there isn't. I mean, believing something that's not true but still causes you to act in a productive, industrious way is still useful to the person who holds it. There's no doubt.
See, it depends on what you mean. It depends on your epistemology of truth, right?
I
So I
suppose
mean,
it does, yeah.
if you're going to say that, only what is empirically, visibly, materially understood as truth is true, then, the value between alive and dead is completely subjective, right? You could blow your brains off, and what scientific study you're going to use? Where's the scientific method to prove the gene for suicide, Kraut? Where's the gene for killing yourself? And the thing is that, that kind of thing, right, can't be decided under the current leftist epistemology of truth. However, if you believe that what is true in terms of value distinctions is essentially the same as what is powerful and what is beneficial for you in universal terms, and I don't mean that, in the philosophical way of universal, I do, but I mean in terms of this is what the universe is setting as the terms, then you can make absolute distinctions of moral and immoral actions. And it's not like it's a perfect thing, right? Like here's something that was kind of like a Morty's mind blower for me. If you believe that civilization itself has an additive evolutionary prospect on people, then your belief about what is the best kind of society itself will guide the future evolution of your species. And it may be that will influence the not just the kind of abilities that you have as a community, but also it will influence the kind of values, the kind of reaction that the universe itself will have to.
Well, I agree with you.
So essentially,
I agree with you. I
we
think
have the ability to tinker with the game a little bit, but I think that there are limits with that. I think that yes, there's a broad amount of things that we can tinker in order to allow us to be more than mere animals, but there are limits and there are obvious things. There's like whether or not you want to be like say the Chinese, the Japanese, or European or German. And those belief systems
European
that you have,
or German. That's a great distinction.
or German.
That's a great distinction. Sorry, carry on.
I mean, so whether you want to be these people, it will have impact on the kind of relationship that you have with the universe, right? Because the Chinese way of sustaining their lives is just as, it's just as they can sustain themselves in just as much a way as the Germans. And it's very difficult to tell, they have their pros, like, they're better at one thing, they're detrimental at another, the Germans in the same way. So there's like a level of unsuredly, I'm not sure how to measure this. Is the universe selecting more for this trait and less for this trait? What's the percentage of racial traits that your civilization is giving you? And we can't really know.
Sure.
But there are absolute answers that we can say are definitively the universe acting in a selective choice. And I think transgenderism is one, homosexuality, not just being gay, because, I am one of those, but the actual lifestyle itself is another. That is something that is obviously immoral, and it's just giving you guys AIDS, and you need to wrap it up at the very fucking least and start having monogamous relationships. Then there's another bunch of factors. And one of the things, I think this is like the best evidence of this in a political thing, the birth rates. When you look at birth rates aligned with political beliefs, the far right is not only meeting but exceeding population replacement rates in Europe, in continental Europe. I think this is France that I remember these statistics from. Whereas the far left, they have cats.
Yeah.
So, the future belongs to, and I believe this, and this is why I was going to say, conservatives will win the day, because not only do conservatives have an argument that relies on a truth-based argument.
It might not be
is
true.
An argument that, well, it might not. It might not be true. That's true. It could be faulty.
Yeah.
However, it will still be a stronger argument because you're arguing from a position of this is true. And also it does seem to be that the behavior of the right wing is giving us a number of different powers, like our birth rates.
Man, we're going to have to wrap this up soon, but this has been a really interesting conversation. But I think that I think you should have a think about the persuasive power of truth arguments, because I think that's low.
I think you're right about that. It is a very the honest truth that people don't believe in truth arguments. But the thing is that I think that this kind of argument, right? So what's happening is there's a sense of nihilism that's being that has been, by the way, for quite some time, inserted into the West because of the lack of a larger value structure. And the left's only answer to what should I do with my life is more freedom, more, we should have less value structure. And that's basically it. But, at some point you can't get any less of a value structure. And the only real, choice you have left is to create some kind of value structure. And at that point, the only choice is going to be the right wing.
Well, you say the right wing, but I don't even know if we should be... this is the thing that I hate. It's because what you're effectively saying, as far as I can see, is... things like the sort of far left Marxian ideologies, you're absolutely correct. You're characterizing them absolutely correctly, but I don't want to just give the left to them. If I let them kick me out of the left as a liberal, then I don't believe in disempowerment of the individual. I believe in the empowerment of the individual, and part of that is very compatible with a lot of conservative thought. Is you get off your ass and make something happen. And this kind of self-empowerment, it's like Jordan Peterson's Tidy Your Room, it's very much about you as an individual. What can you make happen? And when you instill this kind of belief in millions of people, suddenly you get the British Empire. Suddenly you get, world-spanning, hugely dominating political entities,
right,
and the United States as a follow-up to that. It creates giant, powerful, wealthy states. So
and see,
it's
the thing is,
I
don't want to kick you out of the left either, Sargon, because you're not a conservative.
No, I know.
Fuck off.
I know.
Stop
I know.
pretending to be a conservative.
I'm not.
But the thing is that you are leaning left and you're a moderate person, and I don't think that the entire left is off into the wilderness. There are themes in the left that are valuable.
But you are right about the problems there, though, especially in the far left.
But I mean, the thing that I have is I think that the problem is that there's been a conversation that's been happening. It's been happening in the far right. But by the way, the kind of conversation we're having right now, you can read books and listen to speeches given by the likes of William Luther Pierce, Rockwell, and there's actually Jonathan Bowden. I haven't read any of his stuff, but I've heard that he's very fashy.
Send me
the same kind of shit.
Send me the stuff afterwards, because I will listen to it.
I can find you a link immediately of William Luther Pierce.
Yeah.
But anyway, this kind of conversation, that's basically like the kind of thing that they've been talking about in the far right for some time. So it's one of my personal fears that, because they're the only people that have this answer, people will start turning to them. But I think what's just going to happen is that the good will be brought in, and all the bad will be left out. And it's just it'll be a much more nuanced and a fuller, better representation of the truth that they did hold in the far right in their narratives. That's what I think. But that's why I think that they're the right wing, and particularly the far right wing, has a very developed answer. And their answer is actually very true if you talk about this very specific notion of, how do you value things in the universe? And specifically, I'll send you a link. It's to a speech given by William Luther Pierce. And he actually, it's an amazing speech. And one of the things that I find frustrating with it, in the speech, he mentions that all of the racialist stuff that we're doing, that should be secondary to, the submission of yourself to the higher order of the universe. And yet he wrote the fucking Turner Diaries. So it's like he didn't even follow his own rule, and I don't really get that. So, I mean, like, there's a lot of good in that can be selected from it. But at the same time, it has its faults.
I'm just hearing the word, hearing that you need to submit yourself to the higher order of the universe, and I'm thinking, wow, that is just cucked.
I mean, it fucking is, man. But I mean, you have to think about it. It really is, and this is the story of the fucking Bible. This is why the Bible pissed me off, and it pissed a lot of people off, because it's just like, okay, this is what you're gonna do, and if you don't, you're gonna die.
Yeah, I'd rather be Achilles.
By the way, yeah, maybe you would, and it's like this is sort of like the choice. But I think that this is the universe, this is the world we're living in, and it's either it really is either you accept the universe's valuation as true, and you try to learn from the universe, and ultimately, I mean, you don't need to submit yourself to it if you're already in line to it. But there's some people, like the gays, need to fucking submit really hard on their knees right now, right? And like, there's some people that kind of language would apply to. Yeah. Maybe it wouldn't apply to you, but I mean, it's like, it is a true thing to say that you should bring yourself in alignment with the values of the universe, and that's really that I think that belief is what really differentiates the left.
You know what's really interesting is I've actually been writing a big thing about this. I'll probably deliver in the live show I'm going to do about and there's probably a proper philosophical term for this, but I just haven't come across it. But like ideological constructs, which is I was reading a book about Hegel, and they were going through Hegel's philosophy. And I think it's called the particulars of the thing. So the best example is the moon, as in when you see a moon, you see the curvature of the sliver of the moon or whatever. That's your perception of the moon, but you know that the moon is actually round. So you know that your perception and the thing is not the same. And so,
sure.
And I think that the ideological constructs we use are basically the same thing. For example, like the use of the term women or black people. It's like, well, who the fuck's that? I mean, what are you talking about? How are there women opposing your ideological construct of women? And so the ideological construct is like a separate entity to the reality of what women actually are. And it's honestly only coincidental at this point when these two things overlap. And I think that the problem that feminists, any kind of radical movement has, like the alt-right with white people, like any of these ideological constructs, is that unless they map to reality really accurately, then they're fucking worthless, and they'll end up going even further away from reality.
And that's one of the strengths of the left, is that the left has the ability to not need to map to reality. Because the left is all about anti-realism.
Yeah, no. The far left, at least, and that's exactly. Yeah. But that's their biggest weakness. Because eventually, when you get to a point where your beliefs fail to represent reality, then Ayn Rand said you can ignore reality, but you can't ignore the consequences of ignoring reality, and that's exactly what the left has been doing. And that's, we in fact, this is going to be in my show as well. Basically going on about the far leftists who are getting banned from Facebook these days and censored because they post things like men are scum, and they're like, I can't believe I'm being censored for this. It's like, well, you wanted it so that people on protected characteristics couldn't be insulted in this way. This is precisely what you lobbied for. It's just your ideological constructs didn't allow for men to actually be people. It's like, that's your problem, not my fucking problem. And I love watching them come face to face with reality like that. It's gorgeous.
I think there's a broader application of this principle, which is more about. I need to read. I've read about Spengler. I haven't actually read Spengler. I need to, because I think he got something right. When it comes to these sort of ideological positions, your perspective in a real way is the motivation behind your behavior.
Yeah.
So in a lot of ways, the kind of perspective you have, Alexander Dugin put this really well, the belief in the historic individual, who you are and where you believe you're going in the future is what will motivate your actions. I don't see the moderate left as having a firm, belief in a future. In fact, I think the moderate left, because of the peculiarities of the materialist nature of the left, they don't believe in the future much at all. It's just, science will get to it, and it's like, okay, but that's not really like, what kind of civilization do you want to have? What kind of future do your children want to have? It's just, well, I want to fuck around a little bit and experience my degenerate lifestyle, and you can't tell me what to do. You're not my dad, God. And it's just, I don't see in the moderate left a belief in a future. I see in the moderate left a belief in a past and a rejection of the past. Whereas on the right, I see a firm futurism that's not only, now presently, but in the past. It believes in this historic identity, and it's drawing a future, a sort of belief about what the future could and should be under their ideology. I think that's a powerful thing.
I agree with you.
I
agree with you. I think you're absolutely right.
That's happening right now on the right. That I think, the alt-right, for all its qualms, the alt-right's going to be around for like 40, 50 years. Because it's a self-sustaining ideology. I mean, in some form. It might not be the alt-right. I hope Richard Spencer dies of AIDS. I really fucking do.
Seems
I
a bit
hate that
harsh.
guy.
I just find him a joke. I think I honestly thought he might have been controlled opposition. I honestly thought
As a right winger, I fucking hate him.
Yeah.
Richard Spencer makes fascists. He makes fascists look bad. He fucking does. Like if you're a neo-Nazi, Richard Spencer makes you look worse than being a neo-Nazi. Okay, fucking hate him. And me as being, I've moved more to the right as long as I've been politically active. I'm not a fascist, or I wouldn't call myself a neo-Nazi. I would say I'm like a nationalist conservative. I wouldn't say I'm a white identitarian, but I'm like a European identitarian or something like of that nature. But I'm in sort of the fringe sphere of where he is, and despise him because he makes us look bad. But I think that the future belongs to the right, because I don't see that kind of historical narrative being driven anywhere else except the right.
Well, it's really interesting because I've been toying around with the concept of the Chad liberal a lot recently.
Chad liberal.
No. I've been loving it because the British Empire is the perfect example of this.
He lets Muslims fuck his daughter, and he fucks his daughter too.
No. The Chad liberal's been dead for a century.
Oh yeah. Okay.
So it's he's gone, but that doesn't mean he can't come back.
Yeah, it's true.
But I mean, looking at the racial collectivism didn't spread Germans all over the planet, but British liberalism spread British people all over the planet. Yeah, so if you actually want to know what's going to propagate white people, it's not racial collectivism. It's the sort of Chad liberalism where you get down, you do your work, you run your business, you propagate with your wife, you personally worry, like Jordan Peterson-esque, you worry about your immediate surroundings, stop thinking systemically, you get on with your fucking work. You be prosperous. That's the thing.
I think the core thing that's different from the Chad liberals and today's liberals, and maybe not with you, and I have to be honest, this is one of the things that I like. I can't watch your videos; they're boring. But I like
fuck you.
I can't. They're 30 fucking minutes, and you don't do any flashy stuff at all.
Oh my god, you fucking autist!
I can't do it unless it's something super big. It's like, oh, Sargon's talking about this now. I'll check it out. Yeah, but anyway,
just put it on 1.5 times speed, you lazy shit.
I'll do that. I'll listen to you at mouse voice speed.
Yeah, exactly.
But so as far as it goes, there needs to be an identitarian movement, and it needs to be a specific. That's why I think calling myself identitarian And identitarian itself is a really great meme. I think that's sort of the meme that will save the West, right? The belief that you need to have a specific identity and a specific notion of self and value in order to really make any impact on the world. Or, I mean, first of all, in order to make a decision that would be a good decision to have a good impact in the world, you have to have a belief in your identity and value in the first place. Otherwise, you're just, wafting around in a nihilistic wasteland, shoving bananas up your ass and enjoying your own self-degeneracy. And it's like, that's nothing for civilization. You have to have a belief in yourself and a value structure. And I think that right now, that's on the right wing. And,
I'm not disagreeing with you, but this is what annoys me. I want to definitely cultivate. I mean, I get a lot of emails from people who say that, like, my personal philosophy has really inspired them, and then I sat there and I thought, what the fuck's my personal philosophy? I was just like, I don't even know what you mean, and what they were talking about is this kind of attitude of self-empowerment, like that. I've always had it, and I get it from my father, who incidentally is a conservative. But it's always, but it's not just my father; it's my entire family. It's very much this kind of like working class English attitude where, and this is why Hayek really rung with me, because in I think it's chapter 22 in The Road to Serfdom, he sits there and lists these British values, and it's like, these are obviously productive values. You are obviously, if it's like self-reliance, individual enterprise, like all these sort of just good values, virtuous things that have been completely lost, and they've been drained by the socialists. They have drained these away, and it's like,
what happened first when those values lost is that, first of all, those values became personal values.
Yes.
And at the point when those values stopped becoming, universal values, became personal values, then what happened is there was this endless, these personal values became, personal self-interest. And at that point it's more in my self-interest to be a lazy piece of shit and live on welfare than it is to, have this value.
Yeah, it's the victimhood and weakness. That's the thing. It's like saying you can't do something, and it's like, motherfucker, I can do amazing fucking things. Just watch me. That's the sort of attitude we need to bring back. Just to the West in general. I
think that it's coming back with the rise of the sort of like the identitarian movements, and I think that what will happen.
They're the same. Like. You can't do anything. No, like if white people got off their asses and actually acted like white people acted 100 years ago, then and I don't mean like going around oppressing brown people. Right, I mean being industrious. Actually getting on with their lives, marrying, having kids.
Maybe oppressing a few brown people.
Yeah, maybe, but like nobody's perfect. But the white race would be doing a lot better than it is now. But there's this.
Well, yeah, the thing is that this isn't like the common alt-right position.
No, I know.
But if you actually read, like, I'm gonna find it, and then I'm gonna send it to you. The video by William Luther Pierce. I can't, his views are kind of fucked up, but this one video is really inspiring. It really fucking is. And it's like, if this was the one video that I had ever seen, that the only thing that existed of him, he'd basically be like, the Guru International. It's just, he also, wrote the Turner Diaries, and he was very much a kooky guy, crazy guy. Yeah. So, but the one thing is that this kind of conversation, this answer that you're talking about, has been propagating in the far right. And if you actually read the far left and the left as well, the denunciation of the far right, what their argument is the belief that there is one right way to live your life, or that there is objective morality, is itself a fascist belief. And I don't think it's necessarily a fascist belief. I mean, I think fascist beliefs are the same as that, but, in sort of the Venn diagram.
It doesn't have to only be fascist, no.
Right. So, I mean, that's my position, is that this is the right way to do it. And yes, the fascists are right on this one thing. So Hitler got some things right, is essentially what I'm saying.
Okay, well, I think we'll leave it there, and that'll be the takeaway.
That's good.
Hitler did some things right. In fact, did he really do anything wrong? Naked Ape 2017.
I don't know, but this has been a great conversation.
Yeah,
I'm glad we actually.
Yeah, we'll do another one at some point. It's just and you can always hit me up on Skype if you just want to chat anyway. So,
Yeah, sure.
Cool. All right, take it easy, man.
Yeah, I super appreciate this. I think this will be a good
Then you need to keep recording if you don't want
No,
to.
no, it's fine. I'm
This would be
recording.
like a good like entry back into this because I'm really trying to start making content again. It's just you're trying to do the house. I have need to visit my family this Christmas, and it's just like everything is just kind of fucking it up. I'm trying to get it done before Christmas. Probably won't happen. It'll probably be like before the New Year.
Okay. Well, I'll try and start putting some flashy things in some of my videos. And you know, I actually have. No. The last few videos, I've actually been scripting them and actually editing them properly. So I actually have put a couple of things in there occasionally. But I know what you mean about the longer ones. But most people are okay with it, so I don't mind.
Yeah, well, most people, I'm not like most people. But anyway, it's been great talking to you,
Yeah.
Sargon. Give me a link when you upload it, okay? So I can make nasty comments about the Goyim.
I will.
I'll talk to you.
Take it easy, man. Bye.